Side 2 begins with probably the most well-known song of the album. The thing about the Queen's albums is that each of them has at least one iconic and recognizable song. Sheer Heart Attack has Killer Queen, A Night of the Opera has Bohemian Rhapsody, News of the World has We Rock You and We're the Champions, Jazz has Don't Stop Me Now, The Game has Another One Bites the Dust, and so on. A Day at the Races is no exception. And that song in particular is Somebody to Love. Much like Bohemian Rhapsody, it begins with a multi-tracked a cappella before leading into a piano-centric ballad. This time though, very much influenced by the American gospel music of the time, specifically Aretha Franklin, who many of you would know for her version of the song Respect. The lyrics here are also very quite fitting of the gospel theme, lamenting how, despite believing in God for so long and working so hard every day, Freddie seems to feel no genuine love or relief, so he pleads to anyone out there to find him someone to love, someone who could return his feelings and love, a need for companionship, and a hope for actual romance. Like with Take My Breath Away, this could be seen as a subtle allegory for Freddie's sexuality, and yet again, I can't exactly confirm it to be sure, but hey, interpretations. In terms of music, it's still something. Taking what worked well with Bohemian Rhapsody and adding on to that. While it's not exactly multiple sections like that song, it's still made with a similar mindset. Multi-track vocals, very somber but still very hopeful piano bits, and just a sense of bombasticness. Not only with the familiar guitar solo by Brian May, but also when partway through the song seems to stop for a bit. Then we get the slow rise in the vocals going, "Find me somebody to love," from very faint and quiet all the way to very high and bombastic. And then when Mercury sings that "somebody to love" line within mere silence, man, does that give me a chill or two. And then afterwards, the song carries on till it reaches its worthy end. I honestly don't know what else to say about this song. It is just iconic, and a lot of their songs are iconic as well. I've just mentioned a few of them, but this is just worthy of mention. And it goes to show that they're just as capable of playing very hopeful, very enlightening music as they are hard rocking, butt kicking, very heavy kind of songs. And it helps that they have a very diverse range of music in each of their albums. And all in all, Somebody to Love is a pretty sweet and pretty awesome gospel rock track. Next is White Man. Written by Brian May, this song's about the Native Americans and how they suffered under the immigration of European settlers, taking their lands by force instead of sharing it. Iron Maiden would tackle a similar theme with the 1982 song Run to the Hills, with a similar historical theme. Fittingly and rightfully enough, it's another heavy song of Queen's, and musically as it is thematically. It starts off slow and tranquil with a guitar with some effects in it, then about a minute in the song drops the ball and goes near heavy rock, with a chorus of white man, etc. It honestly wouldn't feel out of place if put next to their more earlier, more proggier, more experimental stuff, such as the Black Side of Queen 2. Then the song ends on a calm and somber cliffhanger, where Freddie sings the question of "What's left of your dream?" and the lines of "Just the words on your stone, a man who learned how to teach, but forgot how to learn." Those lines kind of stick to me in some way. It goes to show that inevitably those who cause terrible things will inevitably have terrible things happen to them. It's basically karma. Karma police? Anyway, ultimately, White Man is a musically tragedy based around actual history about the invasions of Native America. Then we have good old-fashioned Lover Boy. This Mercury Pen song is mostly a throwback to the classic British music scene, and with a bit of campness and vaudeville to it as well. And while I say that both Somebody to Love and Take My Breath Away have a bit of a gender ambiguous tone to them, this one really does kind of push it a bit. In a good way, of course. Nothing against that. It's about the titular lover boy who's thinking about what to do tonight, such as hanging out, romancing, having a few drinks maybe. And there's a bit of a flirtatious tone to it. Not only the music, but also Freddie's vocals and what he sings about specifically, such as feeling his love heat and the hot seat of love. It's an innuendo before the actual innuendo song and album. There's even a bit of guest vocals partway through the song from Mike Stone, who was an audio engineer who not only worked with Queen, but also with other bands at the time, like Journey, Foreigner, Blue Oyster Cult, just to name a few, when he sings the line of, "Hey boy, where did you get it from? Hey boy, where did you go?" And then when Freddie finds someone to be with, he offers they dine at the Ritz, and possibly go see Gene Wilder dancing with a Frankenstein monster. It's also the shortest song of the album, clocking in at about 2 minutes and 50 plus seconds, which is fine of course. There are plenty of Queen songs that are much shorter, possibly less than a minute. But all in all, this good old-fashioned love song is short, quirky, a bit cheeky even, and that's why I like it. After that, we have Drowls. Not only written by Queen's drummer Roger Taylor, and the only one he wrote for the Races album, but he also plays the timpani, rhythm guitar, and vocals by himself. It's mostly a semi-dreary song recalling the memories of yesterday, the bleak streets, the mistier mists, and the hazier days. So basically, a normal day in England. This song is about nostalgia, or at least a certain side of it. The places and memories that we know may seem pretty drab and cold, and they are, and yet we seem to be drawn to them, as if they reflect the aging and the imperfection of humanity, how we take life itself for granted and let it go by and waste away. It's always important to remember the good and bad of our pasts, but it's equally important to think about what can we do in the future for ourselves and each other to actually live our lives and face up to it. Here, Brian May's slide guitar really emphasizes the distortion of memories, the feeling as well as the feeling of sleepiness, slowly growing old and being unable to do anything about it. And by the end, Roger faintly mumbles about being Clint Eastwood, Jimi Hendrix, and William the Conqueror, these idolized figures that he wants to be like. In a way, kind of conveying that he preferred to live their lives as opposed to the one he's living now, to be like someone else rather than yourself, as if someone else's identity is somehow better than your own. It's an interesting way of looking at it, come to think of it, and it's honestly an underrated song, and it's a good example of Roger Taylor's good songwriting as part of the Queen band. And so the album ends with Teo Toriyate, or Let Us Cling Together, in brackets. The longest track of the album at about 5 minutes and 50 plus seconds, and once again written by Brian May. This was apparently composed as a sort of shout-out to the Japanese fans, evident by having 2 of its choruses be sung in Japanese. So, like, reverse weeaboos? It's also among the very few Queen songs to have a chorus and verse be sung in another language, so make of that if you will. And near the end, we then hear what seems to be a crowd singing the English chorus alongside Freddie. So it's kind of a proto "We Are the Champions" or "We Will Rock You." It's honestly a very emotional piece and a good closer to an album like this. It's not exactly sorrowful, nor is it exactly triumphant either. It does have this hopeful tone, this feeling of of meeting again across several nations. This sense of unity, even though we're mostly opposite sides of the world. And it's also a good song to sing about fans. It shows that if it weren't for them, bands like Queen wouldn't exactly be around or last long. So I'd like to see more rock bands and, well, even pop bands and musicians in general kind of write songs about their fans as a sort of thank you to them for helping them make make them the band and individual that they are. Then the song concludes with the same shepherd tone that began Tie Your Mother Down and the album as a whole, albeit much longer, intentionally made as a bookend to the album. Although technically it began with a brief guitar riff, then the harmonium bit. So wouldn't it make sense for this song to end with the guitar opening, or have the album and Tie Your Mother Down open with the harmonium, then seg into the guitar bits? I don't know. But anyways, A Day at the Races by Queen is a fantastic album. In fact, all the Queen albums are fantastic, and it's honestly no exception. It's very familiar Queen music, but it's also well ranged enough that each song sounds in some way distinctly different. Sure, some have a familiar formula, such cases being Somebody to Love and Take My Breath Away, and they're mostly Mercury piano ballads. But ones like Millionaire Waltz and Good Old Fashioned Lover Boy, they're quick and quirky pop tunes with a bit of an old vaudeville influence to them. And songs such as Drowls, Toriyate, and Long Away and Tie Your Mother Down, they're fantastic, epic rockers. And all in all, if you're a fan of Queen or you want to get into the band Queen, I say give this album a chance. I know people are more familiar with Night in the Opera, News of the World, and the Flash Gordon soundtrack, but I think this is a good in-betweener between Night of the Opera and News of the World. It's a good transition between the two, and it's an important milestone in how Queen transitioned from being the experimental rock group of the early 70s and into the musical worldwide phenomenon they would be by the late 70s and into the 80s. So unless you've actually checked out this album before, I say recommend it, and if you see it at your local music shop, I'd say buy it, because you won't be disappointed. An album like this is worth listening to at a good day at the races. Next time, we continue our little festive season as we take a look at yet another Genesis album. And the weather forecast says there's going to be some wind, with a chance of wuthering.